Welcome to the Dolphin Pod. This is episode 6 of our show, and today we are bringing you this episode live from the CSI Baseball complex. We are in the Bob Steele press box behind home plate. My name is Joe Foreman, the host of the Dolphin Pod, and I am joined by two special co-hosts for today's episode, Nick Bivona, fellow voice on CSI Sportsnet, and our statistician, Louis Matrone. Nick, Louis, welcome to the show.
Joe, it's been a great pleasure to be here on the Dolphin Pod. Dolphins just came off a big win over Deauville today, 6-5. Looking to keep alive in their postseason hopes. Good games coming up this weekend, but it's always a great time here on the Dolphin Pod.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having us. And again, just to piggyback off of what Nick was saying, great win today, big win today. Offense came alive. Pitching down the stretch was a little shaky, but it ended up getting the job done.
Well, this episode will serve as a playoff push special for the CSI Baseball program. This is the final weekend of the 2023 season. The Dolphins are currently still alive in their search for their first postseason berth as an NCAA Division II program. And in order to get there, they need to be one game better than Mercy College in each team's last 4 games. The Mavericks have won each of their first 2 games against Lincoln University. The Dolphins held on for a 1-run victory over Deauville University here today. And let's talk a bit about that game, our most recent game on CSI Sportsnet. Of course, you can catch that game on demand live and on demand via the ECC network. But Nick, you and I had the pleasure of calling that game. It was a close one. The Dolphins had to sweat it out, but they held on to pick up the win.
Sweat is a good word for that one, Joe. It was a really close win for the Dolphins, winning that one 6-5. It looked like they were going to be in a little bit of trouble as the later innings went on with their bullpen, but great job by Alex Martinez to finish the door, hold on for the big win, got a huge strikeout to end the game, give CSI a win. Their bats looked really good today. They got 10 hits in that game. If they're able to continue that during the rest of the series against Deauville and get a potential loss from Mercy, they'll have a good chance of making the playoffs.
Be sure to come out the next 2 days and support the Dolphins. This episode will debut on Saturday morning. If you're watching it soon after its debut, that means our doubleheader on Saturday, which gets started at noon, will be beginning shortly. Make your way down to the CSI Baseball complex and come support the Dolphins. Louis, you told us you had the official attendance tally for today's game. Nick and I are in a bit of a bubble in the commentary booth. We have our headsets on. We don't get to hear everything that's going on down in the stands, but we had a nice crowd today. They were very vocal, very invested in the game, and firmly behind this Dolphins team. What did you take in from the room next door?
Honestly, it's like you said, it was a great crowd today. At least about 150 people, I'd say, showed up to support our Dolphins. Again, the offense came out to play. The pitching, a little rocky down the stretch, but it ended up also coming out to play and closing the door. And the fans definitely were electric today. Once towards the closing innings and that final out of the game, absolutely amazing.
And we're going to talk a bit more about baseball later in the show, but let's shift our attention to a season that recently ended, CSI Softball. Early in the season, things looked very promising for the Dolphins, a pair of big wins ahead of our last episode of the Dolphin Pod. It's hard to believe that was nearly 2 months ago now.
Right.
Immediately after we finished recording that episode, I was on a plane to Florida alongside our colleague Andrew Rotundo. We covered some of the games down there in Florida at the spring games. Unfortunately, the internet did not cooperate with us at our second venue, Sleepy Hollow, so those audio broadcasts were cut a bit short. But the Dolphins won just a single game in Florida, came back, and ultimately did not qualify for the East Coast Conference playoffs. A lot to like from the Dolphins this season, but a lot that they need to correct heading into next season.
It really comes down to pitching for CSI. That was really what caved them in as the season went on towards the stretch of the season. We saw Alyssa and Anissa Acosta both, have great seasons for the Dolphin first team and second team all conference for the ECC. They were huge for the Dolphins in the entire year. It's going to come down to CSI's pitching staff for next season. If they're able to have some consistent pitching for next year, they'll have a good chance of getting back from this season's end to going into next season with a potential playoff berth.
Well, Louis, you were over at the stats desk for most of our softball games, got a chance to contribute on Sportsnet as well throughout the season. You were at just about every game, if not every game, over at the softball diamond. I do believe you did not miss a game this year.
Did not.
The Lou Gehrig of our,
Yeah, a distinction that Nick doesn't have this year. He did miss one game, if I'm not mistaken.
I did.
You were at MSG, missed one game. Did I miss a softball game this year?
I don't believe
I don't think
so.
I did.
You were there even when you were sick.
Correct.
You were still braving the conditions.
Okay, so I did not miss a game either. Me and Lewis share that distinction for this year.
Sorry about that.
Better luck next year, Nick. But Lewis, what did you take in from over at the stats desk? You had a seat at times right behind the Dolphins dugout, right alongside the Dolphins dugout. What additional information did you get beyond just the numbers from the Dolphins this year, being so close to the team on a game-by-game basis?
I think for me personally, again, to piggyback off of what Nick was saying with the pitching definitely needs to be a lot more consistent down the line. And I also think to some degree there's games where our offense did come alive, and then there was games where it went ice cold outside of just Anissa Acosta. I think there needs to be a lot more depth both in the circle. I know I said mound in one of the previous broadcasts.
I say it a lot too, don't worry.
I know. But there needs
Tracy says it too.
There needs to be some depth.
Softball coach has it, then sure.
Yeah. So, you know what? He neither there. But anyway, so I think there definitely needs to be some depth when it comes to the circle for the Dolphins. I think there needs to be a little bit more consistency in their offense as well outside of Anissa Acosta. But for more or less from what I've gathered, being so close to the Dolphin dugout and stuff like that, it didn't seem like they completely were down in the dumps every single game. It didn't seem like they completely were out of it every single game. But there definitely needs to be some adjustments.
Well, one of the highlights of the 2023 season for CSI Softball came in a doubleheader against American International College. That's something we got a chance to talk about quite a bit on the broadcasts following that Dolphins sweep. But in case you missed it, we'll take a look back at Tracy Garofalo's 300th career win. Over at CSIDolphins.com, our athletic communications intern, Lauren Wilson, authored a great piece which highlighted Tracy's 300th win, her recruiting approach, the kind of players she's looking for on this Dolphins team, and what those players and her fellow coaches have meant to her along the way as she has reached the 300-win mark in her collegiate coaching career. But, Nick, we had a chance to call a couple of games on that day. Andrew and I called Game 1. You and I called Game 2. The Dolphins found a way to come back for Tracy's 300th win and then came from behind once again to win the second game. It was as thrilling a day of softball here at the College of Staten Island as we covered all year.
And that game one you talked about, you and Andrew were on the call, that was a game which the Dolphins were down 8-0, had a 9 spot in the inning, and won the game 9-8 overall. CSI did a great job in that game coming back, as well as the second game. The Dolphins, you can see it in those times in this games, Joe. They show fight, and they do not give up until the final out of the game is recorded. So that's something to look going into next season for this Dolphins team. There's a lot to be promising going into next year. It just all has to click together for CSI and gel together in order to get into the postseason.
Well, Lou, as we mentioned before, you were there for just about every game this year. What have you seen from this Dolphins team that they need to do to make the postseason? And how many times have you covered a game where a team has come from behind 8 runs down and won? I'm not sure I've seen that on Sportsnet. Have you done that at all, covering a game on Stats?
I honestly don't think I have either. I think what makes that game so special, too, is that they were on the brink of getting mercy ruled in that game.
Right.
I believe it was the 5th inning. I believe
Yep.
there was at least maybe 1 or 2 outs in that span. But the fact that they rallied back and came back to put a 9 spot up to show that they had that heart, they had that grit, it's big. I think for them, they just need to keep it simple. They need to play their style of game. They need to keep it simple. They don't need to do too much. They don't need to do anything spectacular or extra. Just go back to the fundamentals and just kind of stick to the simplicity of the game, and I think everything will start to follow that.
Well, that was one of our highlights of the season on Sportsnet. And over the last couple of years, since Nick and Lewis joined us, we've had some highlights on Sportsnet of many kinds, some in the form of on-the-field accomplishments and some in the forms of our favorite calls. So I told each of you that I was going to pose this question on the show. I know I have a few answers I could give from a long time broadcasting CSI Dolphins athletics, but what comes to mind immediately for you, Nick, is one of your favorite calls on Sportsnet? What's at the front of the list?
It's got to be our first call on softball together with the infield fly rule. In the top of the first inning, first and second, a simple pop-up towards second base that was into the outfield, and the umpire called an infield fly rule despite the fact that the second baseman did not make the catch. And Joe and I looked at each other and we said, there's just no way that they called that. And that's exactly what they did. And then I think later on in that game, we also had the infamous play in which it was a single or an error that led to a no-hitter going down in that game. So overall, that game probably sticks out to me the most. We also have had some calls where we've talked about the weather. We know we like to get into that a lot. As we know, the quote-unquote term Foreman Osborne happens a lot. But that game overall sticks out to me the most. It's one of my favorite calls ever. It was one of the best experiences I've had here at CSI. It was a pleasure to do it.
Well, I must say that Foreman Osborne and the birth of that moniker, for me personally, has to be among some of my favorite things to come from Sportsnet that is not related to the on-air product and the on-the-field product. For me personally, I still laugh about that to this day. We're still using that name. It's still my username on several apps. So I think I've definitely milked Foreman Osborne for all it's worth.
Including his Twitter, which you could see some of those calls on Foreman Osborne at Twitter.
Some of our favorites are on my Twitter account at Foreman Osborne. Now, Lewis, you've had plenty of time to think about it. Unfortunately, a lot of our comical calls have been at your expense.
But it's honestly it's all fairness.
It's good. It's good natured and warranted in many cases.
Yes.
In fact, I'd say in every case. I don't think I've ever made a call that I found after the fact was not warranted. But nonetheless, Lewis, you've had some time to think about it. What's your favorite call that you've gone back and listened to from Sportsnet?
There has been a lot. Honestly, again, the infield fly, the Foreman Osborne being born. There was that time where we were playing a game, and it was you and our coworker Andrew Rotundo on the call, and unfortunately, in that at bat, Alyssa Acosta got hit in the head, unfortunately, and his subtle "oh no," just right after that, and it honestly, in the moment, it's unfortunate. Thank God that she was okay after the fact. But in that moment, it was just one of those just laughable moments where it's just silence and then just oh no. So there was that one. Man,
the jellyfish one sticks out to me too. Team Masha versus Team Lou.
I mean,
that's a good one.
There was also the one. There was one for baseball when it was our other colleague Nick Durst. And the famous question of what is 3 plus 3?
Oh, yep.
And it was for Thomas Martin, whose number is 33. And Nick ended up answering Joe, it's 6, Joe. And
don't forget about those Rocky Mountain oysters, too.
That was all one game.
That was all one game.
That game was a treasure trove of weirdness.
I was at home listening to that. That was a great broadcast overall.
That was the one game that I actually got to sit inside the same room as Joe and our colleague Nick Durst while they were calling the game.
Yep.
And I gotta say, though, that stuck out to me. Again, the infield fly stuck out to me. The Foreman Osborne, the oh no. And honestly, the jellyfish fields, yes, it is against me, but it's, again, warranted and fair. So, fair game.
Well, there's never a bad time to shout out one of our sponsors. So, one of my favorite calls of all time
I know you're going
is the Mickey 3.
Yep.
That's not where you thought I was going, Nick. I'm going there next, I promise.
Okay.
I'm going there next.
Okay. We're on the same
wavelength.
Yeah.
First and foremost, getting to call every Austin Mick three-pointer a Mickey 3, and that was before McDonald's was a sponsor, was a great thing. And then we got a chance to do it this year if we hit a 3. Austin, of course, no longer was on the team, but to call everything a Mickey 3 regardless was still fun.
Yeah.
However, you both know where I'm going with this. McDonald's sponsors our pregame show each and every game. We were given chicken nuggets and cheeseburgers before the game, along with some drinks. Now, I have to say I ate the chicken nuggets before we went on the air. Right. I got to enjoy all of those myself.
That's fair.
Yep.
You know, I am our fearless leader, so I have some perks like that where I get first crack at the food. I'm all for those chicken nuggets. So I ate the chicken nuggets. By the time Andrew arrived at the commentary desk, the box was empty. So during the pregame, part of the presentation was to say we got to enjoy some chicken nuggets courtesy of McDonald's. So I held up my box of chicken nuggets. Andrew looks over at me on a live broadcast and says, Joe, it's an empty box. I'm like, yes, Andrew, it's empty because you ate the chicken nuggets. And he says, no. You left me an empty box. That was not scripted. That was not planned. I did not appreciate it, and immediately it was time for a commercial break. Now, Nick, you had a nice moment during a McDonald's pregame show getting to enjoy some of the drinks left for us.
I did. There was a nice Coke that was left for me. I had a nice little sip as I was quite parched when I was doing our pregame show.
Where are you now?
Yeah. But, yeah, no, that we always appreciate McDonald's and their contributions here to the College of Staten Island, and that was another great call that we had with that game. We also had that game with American International, one of our favorite calls, where we kept making some B references because they were called the Yellow Jackets. So that was a good game as well.
There was some buzz in the building that
There
day.
was. Listen, Luis Armos hit that game-winning 3 at the end, so there definitely was a buzz in the arena that night.
You know, I remember, I think there was another one with the bite of the cheeseburger, right? Was that you on the
That was
call?
me.
That was him.
Okay. That one was funny too. But you know, the fact that Andrew came on and just openly said that I knew where you were going with it too. It was great. That was honestly fantastic.
Well, Andrew still needs a headshot. He was not there on picture day.
He's John Cena in the flesh.
That's right. Can't see him, but we need to get him a headshot. The joke was that when the Rangers had the better of the Devils in the first round, that we'd make his headshot the New York Rangers logo.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that didn't turn out so well for us. The Rangers did lose. Lewis, Nick, and I, all Ranger fans. Andrew got a chance to celebrate. He won't be celebrating long. Carolina in 4, right, guys?
Absolutely, yeah. Not having a question.
All right. Good to hear. In the first of 2 conference championships during the last couple of weeks, CSI Esports picked up the East Coast Conference Rocket League Championship title. They also picked up an ECAC Championship in Hearthstone, their 4th conference championship in the last academic year. The Dolphins were also invited to participate in the Collegiate Esports Commissioners Cup, being held this year in Texas. The Dolphins are one of 16 teams that will be competing in the Rocket League bracket. The event, also sponsored by McDonald's, featured an appearance by the one and only Ronald McDonald as well. You can see more photos like this from this weekend's event over at CSI Esports on Twitter. They will be posting pictures and video from the event throughout the weekend. Be sure to follow all of the action live online as well. Information on how to view the events can be found on Twitter at the Collegiate Esports Commissioners Cup Twitter account and at CSI Esports on Twitter. I would be remiss if I didn't mention one final conference championship on the schedule for the College of Staten Island. Outdoor track and field competed in the ECC championship yesterday, and for the Dolphins, 6 new program records were set this year. The Dolphins finished top 3 in 3 separate events at this year's ECC championship. Jasmine Severo, second in the high jump. Skylar Pointer, second in the hammer throw. Ava Thompson, third place in the discus. Dolphins wrap up the outdoor track and field season. A brand new track and field complex recently completed on campus. The search for a new head coach continues. That new coach will be in place at the start of next season. A lot to look forward to for CSI Track and Field. Wanted to make sure we wrapped up giving them a shout out for their season, which came to an end yesterday. A lot to like from them, and we look forward to their future in an all-new complex that they call home here on the campus. CSI Baseball looking to make a playoff push down the stretch of their season. We already touched on today's game and what needs to happen ahead of Sunday's season finale for baseball to make it. I'm going to cheat over my shoulder. We have a 3-3 game in Dobbs Ferry in the 6th inning. By the time this show is over, we may know the result of that game. 2 games tomorrow. We expect that Christian Rice would pitch one of those games and that John Esposito would pitch the other. Nick, what do the Dolphins need to get the job done tomorrow and pick up 2 must-have wins?
Well, we've seen John Esposito down the stretch of the season. He's been really big for the Dolphins. There's a reason he is the ace of this team. He's been very consistent at his last couple starts. We saw the game against Stacky. We went a full distance and got them a big win against Stack 10-3. The issue for Christian Rice in his last game against Stack, he couldn't get out of the 5th inning. Had a lot of walks and command issues in that game, and he had 109 pitches when he was taken out for 2/3 of an inning. So if he can keep those command issues at bay and have a good, overall command as the game goes on, that will give the Dolphins a chance. You have to like what their bats are doing, though, as these last couple of games have gone on. They had 10 hits, as we mentioned earlier today. They've overall have been getting runs these last couple of games as well. If they can continue to do that, they'll have a chance, but they also need Lincoln to win one of these games against Mercy, so we'll have to see what happens.
Well, Lewis, you're the only one in the building who gets a live look at the pitch count, pitch by pitch. Our pitch tally refreshes per at bat. We spoke about it ahead of today's game. The Dolphins needed longevity from their starters. How crucial is that going to be tomorrow and the rest of this weekend?
It's absolutely crucial. The pitching staff for the Dolphins definitely needs to be able to go deeper into the game. Kehoe, I believe, finished with, I want to say it was 116 pitches. 65 of them were strikes. So it wasn't, that bad of a strike to ball percentage. But again, he only lasted, I believe it was 5 innings. They needed him to go that extra 6th inning just to get the 7, 8, and 9 guys going. But I think, just to piggyback what you were saying, the ability for these pitchers to go deeper into games to maybe more or less rest some of the other bullpen arms that they have to make sure that they can get those solidified people into those portions of the game, it's definitely got to happen.
And we saw that against Stack. Aiden Kilty pitched all 4 games of that series, and that's really what the Dolphins don't want to happen. They would like to get their stars later into the game. Keogh got into a lot of command issues in the first inning. That's realistically why he was taken out in the 5th inning. He threw over just about 40 pitches in that first inning. So if the Dolphins can get their command issues going in tomorrow's game and give the bullpen some rest and maybe give them at least 2 innings of work, they'll have a good chance to keep them rested for Sunday, because Sunday could very well be the deciding game of who makes the playoffs.
No question about it. And speaking about something that we haven't touched on yet from today's game, the Dolphins got 2 huge outs in the game on caught stealing. Michael Kehoe behind the plate, throwing out 2 key runners in big spots. The game ultimately decided by 1 run. That was huge for the Dolphins today as well.
Yeah, Michael Keogh has been really good defensively for the Dolphins, whether he's in the outfield or behind the plate. Those 2 caught stealings really kept the Dolphins in the lead, and you got to believe that's why they won this game. If not for those 2 caught stealings, who knows what happens in the rest of the inning. Duville easily could get a run maybe and tie the game or take the lead. So Keogh was big for that, helped his brother Ryan out. They got the win today, and they're still alive in the postseason race.
And for the Dolphins, we've seen a few first-year players really emerge for them. Vincent Weigel, A.J. Vigliotti among them. But players like Michael and Ryan Kehoe coming back from their freshman season, playing extremely well this year. You can't ask for much more than you've got from the 2 of them.
Yeah, you cannot really ask more out of them. You talked about Vincent Weigel and A.J. Vigliotti. They've been huge with their bats. Vigliotti hitting over 400 on the season. He's been a huge part of this CSI offense. We've also seen Thomas Marin down the stretch of the season. He's been big with his bat, and that's what's keeping CSI in these games and keeping them in the standings. If they can continue to hit like that, they'll have a chance, but they, like we've already mentioned, they need a lot. They're going to need some help on the side, so we'll have to see how they do. But what they did today is very encouraging going into that doubleheader tomorrow.
Well, my iPad just died, so we no longer have a look at the score between Mercy and Lincoln. We'll be sure to check that out at the end of the show. But, Lewis, should the Dolphins play in round 1? And this question's for both of you. Lewis can answer first. Road trip for the first game of the series or the first game of the postseason?
I don't see why not.
I don't see why not either, yeah.
Take the Dolphin Pod on the road, you think?
Dolphin Pod on the road would be interesting. We showed some images from your previous road trip at Stack, where we had a couple pictures showing the broadcast. You can see that on demand. But
we'll tell the story again because Lewis didn't get to hear it.
He didn't get to hear it, but it could be leading to maybe future potential images that are on the podcast, or not on the podcast, on the broadcast, that could be funny as well.
So let's go back to Friday, 1 week ago. This is for you, Lewis, and for our viewers who didn't tune into the broadcast earlier today. Baseball on the road against Stack. Doubleheader last Friday. Dolphins need big conference wins down the stretch of the season. We depart from the College of Staten Island, get probably about 100 feet out of the exit on Victory Boulevard, and our bus driver realizes the compartment storing our equipment is open. We have to pull over, stop, and close it, making sure we didn't lose anything. Not a good start. We get on the highway, and he realizes that he has engine problems and that we can only go 40 miles an hour. He calls the bus depot. They give him some advice on what needs to be done to perhaps remedy the issue, and we think we have it fixed.
It's like an episode of Speed.
So we arrive at Stack, we play the games, get back on the bus. This is about, let's say, 6 hours later after our initial engine troubles. We get back on the road, engine troubles once again. We have to contact the bus depot and change buses. On your screen, you will see the aftermath of that change of buses and Mike Morrow's reaction to it. I was having a bit of fun. Head coach Morrow, not as much fun, but we caught that moment in time. We have a picture of it. You see that on your screen now. It was quite the moment. Now, Lewis, I know Nick has seen the picture. Have you seen it yet?
I have not, no.
So we're going to have to show Lewis that picture if we can find it. Let's get him a copy. It's right here. This is for Lewis. There it is.
Oh,
so
boy.
Lewis is seeing it for the first time.
Boy.
Our viewers are seeing it on their screen right now. So there's a look at the aftermath of us changing vehicles. But beyond that, we got home no problem. Picked up my dinner, parked myself in my chair, and took in some NBA basketball when I got home, well rested after a long day. But it was a good day for the Dolphins on Friday. They split those games at Stack. Not so good earlier this week. big rebound win today. Final takeaways from today's matchup with the Saints and a look ahead to the last 3 games in this series.
Well, we saw in those games get stacked. CSI's pitching just was not there overall. They got out. They could not really get outs. Christian Rice went 4 2/3, was taken out early. Stephen Kalika in that start on Tuesday, he didn't even get out of the first inning. That's really what hurt the Dolphins in that series, and they really needed Keogh today to get them some innings. Unfortunately, only gave them 5, but at the end of the day, that's good enough to get a win, and that's exactly what happened. The bullpen did their job. They made it a little shaky towards the end of the game, but the Dolphins got some insurance runs as the game went on. They were able to hold on for that 6-5 win. If they can get some big innings tomorrow from Rice and Esposito, they'll have a chance. We'll have to see if they can keep that postseason berth alive. But as we've already mentioned, they still need help. It's really not in their own hands of controlling their own destiny. They need some help as well as getting a wins tomorrow against Duville.
Lewis, final takeaways from today's game and earlier in the week.
Well, to start from today's game, again, I think the offense was firing on all cylinders for the most part. Again, 6 runs on 10 hits. Definitely getting those insurance runs late in the game helps. The pitching definitely could have been a little bit more smooth, for better or worse, instead of shaky towards the end. But again, still got the job done. I think for the next 2 days ahead, for the next 3 games in these next 2 days, the doubleheader tomorrow, it's definitely 2 huge games, especially with having your ace going probably in the second game and having arguably your second or third best pitcher on the rotation going in the first game. But I think it ultimately does come down to what's going to happen on Sunday. I think depending on who you decide to throw that game, who is going to get the start for that game is going to be huge. Just to piggyback for what you were saying, against the games against Stack, our pitching wasn't as strong. As you said, Kalika didn't even get out of the game that he pitched out of the first inning. He actually also didn't even get out of the inning that he came into relief the game before that. So I think they really have to determine what they're going to do here in terms of the options they have for Sunday. But I think obviously getting through tomorrow is going to be big. And I think just, again, keeping it simple, making sure that all the fundamentals are in check, making sure that the errors are kept to a minimum, try to get a better control of the game, limit the walks that you could possibly give up, and I think tomorrow is going to be an epic day.
You got to keep in mind also, Joe, that Senior Day is also this weekend, so it's already a lot of emotions going into the week with a playoff berth on the line as well. Everything is on the line for CSI at this rate. You want to get those seniors into the postseason potentially. You want to give them an opportunity to play for a playoff berth. They're in that chance now. We'll have to see what they do this weekend.
Well, that's a motivating factor for the seniors on the Dolphins roster. They have one final chance to get into the postseason. Some of their seniors did get a taste of the postseason back in 2019, and one of those seniors almost certain to get a start tomorrow. How big has John Esposito been for this team this season?
And I mentioned it earlier. He's been the ace of this team. He's literally the rock, if we have to mention it, for this team. We saw him maybe potentially almost warming up towards the end of this game that we had today. And we thought maybe he could come in out of relief because at that point in the game, it was 6-5, first and second, 2 outs. You thought maybe just to get the final out of the game, you bring in your best pitcher and assure yourselves the win. He'll go tomorrow in one of those 2 games against Duville. They need him more than ever. If he can give them 7 to 8 innings, maybe even go the full distance depending on which game they use him. They'll have a really good chance. You have to like what he's done these last couple of games, and overall throughout the season, he's been really good for CSI.
Based on what we've seen throughout this year, it looks like he would probably start game 2 tomorrow.
Right.
I was going to say he could definitely go either game. He has pitched in doubleheaders more or less in the second game because they know that he can definitely go 7 innings. There was that game, I believe, at Stack that you were at that he went the full game or close to it.
He went 7 of 9, and it was a 9-inning doubleheader.
Yeah.
Right. A very unusual scheduling format.
Yeah. So, but again, just he has been that rock, just like you said. He's been the most dominant pitcher of the CSI pitching staff all year, and I think he's been so crucial to this team, whether it's to make sure that he gets those outs in big spots or to just get through innings and a lot quicker than majority of the people. But at the same time, it's going to have to come down to how effective can he work with his fastball, how effective can he work his breaking pitch. It's going to be a very, very big day for him tomorrow.
We've seen a lot of his starts also. He gets into early trouble where he'll give up a double or a walk, but he fights through the adversity of those starts, and he's able to get out of it and keep the Dolphins in line to win the game. He does that a lot. He, doesn't like to make himself in those pressure situations, but he, goes through the pressure and he works through it and gives the Dolphins a chance to win. He'll look to see if he can do that tomorrow.
Until our next episode, which we hope will be at the ECC Baseball Championship, we will see. This has been Joe Foreman alongside my co-hosts for this episode 6 of the Dolphin Pod, Nick Bivona, Louis Matrone. Each of you, thanks for joining me. Do you have any final words before we sign off?
If you go right ahead, Lou.
Way to pass the buck.
Yeah.
Pressure's on, Lou.
I've been going first all the time.
What have you got, Lou? What have you got?
Honestly, let's go Dolphins. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, what Lou said, let's go Dolphins. Hopefully they can make that playoff spot for the baseball team. These last 3 games will be very, very fun to watch against the Saints. It should be an overall great weekend, but a great day here for the Dolphins. They get the win. We get to record the Dolphin Pod here today. An overall great experience here at the College of Staten Island.
I'll try and do a little better. Fins up, everybody, as we sign off for this episode 6 of the Dolphin Pod. Joe Foreman, Nick Bivona, Louis Matrone. We hope to bring you episode 7 from the East Coast Conference Baseball Championship Tournament. We will see if the Dolphins can find their way in. Still very meaningful baseball left to be played. Be sure to tune into that on CSI Sportsnet Saturday and Sunday, May 6th and 7th on the ECC Network. Until next time, thanks for watching.